to write that there are many who believe rap music, hip hop music are to blame for the increase in gang violence, teen pregnancy, and a plethora of other social issues within the African American community. Poverty, unemployment, gang violence, dysfunctional public schools, dysfunctional families, and all kinds of health inequities plague our neighborhoods across the United States. Many of the problems that hound our communities have reached near epidemic proportions. There are many problems in the African American community that need to be addressed and rectified. Many believe that musicians, music producers, music executives, and record company labels are the culprits in the moral decay that is happening before our very eyes. Many think that rappers and musicians should be more responsible and that they are influencing our communities in a negative way. I disagree somewhat. I agree to a point, but I disagree with that in so many ways. I believe that many of the problems that face our communities are a direct result of the fact that many of us have turned away from God. So consequently, we're suffering the consequences of disobedience. God, and I'm speaking to my community, it applies to other communities as well, but right now I'm speaking to my community, the African American community. God saw us through the torture of enslavement. God saw us through the humiliation of segregation. God saw us through the volatile civil rights movement. God has brought us from the outhouse to the White House. God has brought us from the cotton fields to the boardrooms. God has been mighty good to us black folk. The question is, how good have we been to him? It seems that the moment we started to get a taste of freedom and financial stability and material things that, we started seeing that we were starting to get to play on a level playing field, we forgot who brought us this far. Many of us have turned our backs on religion, and many of us refuse to acknowledge that God's way is the best way. Many of us have chosen to overlook the well-known fact that obedience is better than sacrifice. Our communities are in disarray because so many of us have chosen to live our lives in a manner that directly contradicts the moral standards that we were taught in church, in Sunday school, in Baptist Training Union, in Bible Man. We have a few dollars in our pockets, and we have the freedom to come and go as we please, and therefore we as a people have started to take God for granted. I cannot in my good conscience say that rap music or hip hop music is the reason that our youth are so wayward and out of control. Indeed, music choices play a role in the way a child thinks. However, it is the role of the parent to monitor and, if necessary, censor the music that a child listens to. The same holds true for watching television and surfing the internet. We cannot scapegoat 2 Chainz, Chris Brown, Nicki Minaj, and Lil Wayne for the choices that our young people make. I'm the first to say that musical artists should be more mindful of the impact that their music has on young, impressionable minds. They should be more responsible. However, that does not give parents the right to blame rap music for their children's poor choices. The African American community needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and seriously self-analyze and self-evaluate our choices of role models. For too long, the black community has placed athletes, musicians, and rappers on a pedestal. For too many of our youth, their role models are people they will never meet face to face. Too many of our young boys and girls do not have positive role models in their homes or in their neighborhoods. Far too many of our children are rarely exposed to positive role models. In contrast, far too many of our children are consistently exposed to negative images. Let me be clear. I'm definitely not a fan of the current version of rap or hip hop music. I think that a great portion of music today is filthy, vile, and vulgar, and it is a reflection of a society filled with ignorance and a lack of morality. I certainly am not placing an indictment on all rap and hip hop music. There are some musical geniuses within the rap and hip hop genres. Unfortunately, too often the emphasis in these genres is placed upon sex, money, and violence. It is a shame that some of that talent could not be used to create music that inspires, educates, empowers, and encourages positive choices. I believe that our musical artists now are driven mostly by greed as opposed to creativity or awareness of social issues. In our nation, everything is all about the almighty dollar. People will sell their mother for a dime these days. Our nation lacks morality and strength of character. And indeed, music is a reflection of society. One only has to tune in to 106 in Park or any other urban music show to see the lack of morality in our nation. We live in a nation where promiscuity is acceptable. We live in a nation where doing drugs socially is the norm. We live in a nation where living the thug life is glorified. We live in a nation where sagging pants and showing your dirty drawers is a fashion statement. This sad state of affairs is reflected in the music we hear and the trash that we see on television. It's unfortunate that the African American community is where these immoral values seem to reside in a disproportionate rate. As a result, our communities are filled with young people who know how to spit rhymes but are unable to do simple math or comprehend the plot of a short story. We live in communities where Ebonics is the language of choice, yet we wonder why unemployment hovers over 20% among African American males. I stand firmly on this hypothesis that music is a reflection of society. For instance, when I was born in 1967, the music reflected a sense of love and unity. I grew up listening to great music in the 70s and 80s. Most of the songs I heard were about love, romance, relationships, family togetherness, and real life situations. I grew up listening to love songs and upbeat party songs that were all about having good, clean fun. That cannot be said about most of the music we are being offered in 2014. Music today is mostly centered on getting pleasure, money, hoes, and smoking weed. Sex, violence, and self-gratification. Love is a word that is seldom used. There is very little family togetherness, romance, love, or sense of community reflected in the music of today. Today's music clearly reflects the selfishness of our nation, especially in the African American community. We have become a selfish group of people. That is particularly sad because not so long ago, all we as African Americans had was God and each other. How soon we forget about the struggle and how the struggle kept us unified and therefore strong. Racism is alive and well in our nation. That's obvious. However, it is time for us to stop being our own worst enemy. It's time to wake up from the deep sleep of complacency. It's time to awaken from the slumber of ignorance. It's time to make positive changes in our communities. Our communities are broken. It's time to come together and fix them. It's time to correct all the behaviors that brought us to the lowest point in our history. We are more enslaved today than we were 200 years ago. But it's time to stop blaming Wiz Khalifa and Waka Flocka for the problems in our homes and communities. It's time for us to start being role models for our children rather than counting on athletes, actors, rappers, and singers to teach our children morality and good behavior. It's time to take responsibility for our actions. Our forefathers suffered too much for us to let it all go down the drain. We've come too far to let all our gains turn into losses. We must never forget the struggle and the reason for the struggle. We are too great a people to behave in the manner that so many of us do. We can do better. We must do better. It's imperative that we do better. If we don't do better, we may as well head back to the plantations and start working in the cotton fields again. This has been Opening Eyes and Opening Minds. This is your boy Jay Carlos, and I'm signing off. I will talk to you next Tuesday. Have a great week. Remember, I love you, my brothers and sisters, and let us not forget the struggle, and let us unite and continue to fight the struggle, because the victory is ours. And I say that simply because this battle is not ours alone. It belongs to the Lord.